This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Man City by bringing my match review player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Timothy Fosu-Mensah and Jara Riedewald after the game. So let's begin. Against the odds, Palace ended Manchester City's 18-match winning streak by gaining a goalless draw at Selhurst Park, but it could have snatched a memorable victory if Luka Milivojevic had converted an injury-time penalty. The Eagles held firm for the whole game to repel the country's most potent attacking force, and it looked as though they would have been rewarded when they were handed a spot kick beyond the 90th minute, but Milivojevic saw his effort saved by Ederson as the chance to become the first team to beat Guardiola's side this season slip away. Despite City's huge lead at the top of the table and an early chance for Bernardo Silva which was scuffed wide, Palace were undaunted as they kept Guardiola's men at bay throughout, and with a sign of things to come, early opportunities fell their way. The first came when some miscommunication between Mangala and Ederson allowed a Wayne Hennessy clearance to bounce between them and Christian Benteke nipped in, but the Frenchman managed to recover and deflect the goal-bound effort wide of an open goal. Then on 30 minutes after a free kick was cleared into his path, Patrick Van Aanholt saw a volley from 25 yards take a slight deflection that required Ederson to produce a full stretch save to tip it away. But the Eagles' bright start was halted when Scott Dann was stretchered off with a serious looking knee injury after a challenge from Kevin De Bruyne, ending his 200th Premier League appearance on a sour note. That, as well as City being forced into a change of their own after Gabriel Jesus came off in tears, saw the game lose some of its edge until his replacement Sergio Aguero took matters into his own hands by cutting inside and letting fly. Bahir's shot struck Jara Riedewald and bounced kindly off the post, and then in stoppage time De Bruyne cut the ball back to City's all-time top scorer, who shanked wide as Palace held on to their parity up until half-time. They continued in the same vein after the restart and continued to frustrate their opponents, but with their winning streak in jeopardy, Guardiola's team cranked up the pressure and Gundogan bent a ball a whisker wide from 25 yards before Fernandinho belted into the White Horse Lane end, and then Aguero headed straight at Hennessy. And soon after, the Eagles glassman made his first big stop of the game when a deep cross by Raheem Sterling found Leroy Sané at the back post, but Hennessy managed to block it first time with his body. But the host was still in contention, and with 30 minutes to go, Wilfried Zaha's low centre was dummied by Riedewald and gave Andros a sight on goal, but he screwed his snapshot high and wide. But as usual at Selhurst Park this season, there'd be late drama, and once again it centred around a last half penalty when Zaha was appended in the box by Sterling and John Moss pointed to the spot. Milivojevic, having scored 3 times from 12 yards this season, once again stepped up to take it, but saw his blast down the middle strike the legs of Ederson, as Roy Hodgson's team were forced to settle for just a point against the runaway league leaders. Now for some stats from the game. Possession, 26% Palace, 74% Man City. Shots, 10 for Palace and 15 for City. Shots on target, 1 for Palace and 4 for City. Corners, 7 for Palace and 8 for City. And fouls, 14 for Palace and 11 for City. This was City's first away goalless draw in the Premier League since March 2016 against Norwich City, ending a run of 34 matches in which at least 1 goal was scored. Palace have only lost 1 of their previous 10 Premier League games, won 3 and drawn 6, having lost 13 of their 16 before this run. Hodgson has now failed to see his side score in his past 5 Premier League matches against City, drawing 2 and losing 3, a goalless run that stands at 465 minutes. This was Palace's 4th clean sheet in their past 8 Premier League games, as many as they have managed in their 25 matches prior to this. Wayne Hennessy was the first Palace keeper since Nigel Martin in May 1993 to keep a Premier League clean sheet against City. Palace have missed 5 penalties since the start of last season, 2 more than any other Premier League side. So I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join in with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. And much like a forum, it's a great place to upload videos, pictures and any articles you want to share with other Palace fans. Then of course, much like a forum, do post on there so that not only other people can see them, but also so they can comment and you can start having discussions with them. So if you are someone like myself who likes to, talk to other fans and hear other fans' opinions and comment on them, then of course do join the Facebook group, because like I've said already, much like a forum, it's a great place not only to share your opinion but also to read others as well. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players' performances from 1 to 10, with obviously 10 being the best. And you can do this along with your views of the game. So whether you're a Man City fan, whether you're a Palace fan, do leave your comments below about what you thought about the game. And if you want to go even further, leave your player ratings as well, so I can compare how you rated the players' performances to how I rated the players' performances myself. And this is purely because obviously myself, I can come back to the video and see what the listeners thought about the game and about players' performances, but also any other fans from other clubs, Man City and even Palace fans who come to the video who wouldn't normally listen to the podcast, they can also read your comments and not only listen to my opinions in the podcast, but they can also read your comments in the comment section and see how their opinions of the game and their player ratings and how they thought the game went. They can compare that opinion to their own as well as listening to mine. So like a forum, the YouTube comments is a great place to share your opinion and get in discussions. And like I've said already, come to the video, don't just listen to my opinion, but do comment below what you also think about the game. Now, if you do want to follow any of these social media pages and obviously join the Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting a goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I am going to give an 8. Started off by making a few comfortable saves and catches on his return to the first team for the rested Julian Speroni. Did fantastically well to deny Leroy Sané with what looked like a certain goal in the second half. So Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him an 8, and before I go on to talk about his performance, I've just got to say, obviously we all expected Speroni to play because he's been doing reasonably well recently, but Hennessy came into the side, quite a lot of us were worried, but he proved us wrong with what was a fantastic performance. So you've got to give it to credit to Hennessy, because he's come up for a lot of criticism recently. He is probably one of the biggest scapegoats within the team, and actually he came back into the side and actually put in a really solid performance, and that's why I've given him an 8. And actually, having looked at other player ratings, some people have given him 9s, some have even given him 10s, but I personally think an 8 for him, I think, really sums up his performance. But in terms of what he done in the game, obviously we didn't expect him to start in front of Julian Speroni, but we can only expect, because it was a game only a few days after the Arsenal game, you could expect, because Speroni's quite old, it was probably resting him. So whether it's because Speroni had been dropped because he was being rested, or whether it's something else has happened, we don't know. But let's just presume he was being rested and Hennessy had to step in, obviously, because Speroni's obviously fatigued from the Arsenal game. And actually that didn't affect his game. He came in as if he hadn't have never been out of the team in the last few weeks and put in an absolutely solid performance. But in terms of the game overall, he started the game really, really well. Man City putting constant pressure on us, and there were quite a few comfortable saves which he made, which you would expect, because normally we saw last season Hennessy struggled to make a single save against Man City, whereas here, obviously at Selhurst Park, with us having loads of momentum from that unbeaten run, he went into this game and was making good, comfortable saves along the pitch throughout the first half, and also a few catches as well. So there are quite a few times, from crosses coming into the area. We don't normally see this from Hennessy commanding his area, but in this game, likes of Leroy Sané and De Bruyne, they were putting crosses into the area, and actually Hennessy doing what he should normally do. He commanded the area well and actually made loads of catches. And like I've said already, the fact that he came in for Speroni, hasn't played recently, the fact that he came in and put in such a good performance where he made fantastic saves, comfortable saves, and he made these catches, really just epitomises how good his performance was. There was one in particular that I personally I liked really well. The save he made from Leroy Sané was absolutely fantastic, and if you look on the club's website, you look at photos of the game, there's a fantastic photo which shows how Hennessy put his arms out, made himself big, and how he made the save from Leroy Sané, because Leroy Sané got on the end of a cross from the right flank, great switch of play, Obviously he's hit it goalwards, and Hennessy's made himself big and made a fantastic save, which just really, like I've said, that save in particular just epitomises his whole performance, because he made comfortable saves throughout the whole game, but that one in particular, that game-defying moment where he stopped Sane from scoring what would have been a fantastic goal, lovely switcher play, the fact that he stopped him just really sums up how good his performance. But like I've said already, it was a surprise start for him. We didn't expect him to start ahead of Speroni, but he proved he was worthy of doing a job when he's needed to. So he just proved in this game that even though maybe Roy Hodgson prefers Speroni, but it just shows that actually Hennessy has got what it takes, and hopefully the fact that he played so well in this game and actually kept a clean sheet as well, hopefully that confidence will, boost Hennessy, and maybe he may get another chance to run out in the team, because I know there's some debate as to whether Hennessy's better or Speroni's better. I think they're almost average on the same level, but do comment below what you think. But I think now, because he's kept a clean sheet and maybe he'll get another run out in the team, maybe this is Hennessy's chance to get back into the side and take the first team goalkeeping slot off Speroni. But an 8 here, another fantastic performance here, making comfortable saves, obviously making loads of catches and commanding his area really well, and that one save from Leroy Sane in particular was absolutely fantastic. But an 8 for Wayne Hennessy, a good performance from him. Now to move on to the right back, Timothy Fosu-Mensah, who I'm going to give a 9. Really grew into the game and did a great job to keep Leroy Sane quiet in the first half. He was strong when tackling and was composed on the ball. A great performance from the on-loan defender. So Timothy Fosu-Mensah here, I've given him a 9, and considering the last few games Martin Kelly's been playing at right back, and only because of injuries and the fact that Joe Ward was in form, Fosu-Mensah actually got pushed out of the side and hadn't really had a sniff in, but he's got his chance in recent games to come off the bench and obviously to start again here, and actually he's proved now to me personally, actually yes, he probably should be starting now, because Martin Kelly probably has to play centre back now because we've got injuries, and Joe Ward's still out injured as well. So Fosu-Mensah is going to get his chance back in the side, and actually I think he does deserve it, because the last few games he's been putting in solid performances, and this game here really just showed us what he is all about and how good he really is. But to be honest, he didn't start the game that well, obviously because Man City were putting constant pressure on us, but something I liked about his performance, the reason I've given him a 9, is the fact that he grew into the game. So he may have started a bit slowly, but as he got into the game, after the first sort of 10 minutes or so, he came even better and made the game his own. And especially in terms of keeping Leroy Sane quiet, that was absolutely superb, because Leroy Sane has been one of the biggest threats for City this season, in one of the best attacks in the league, if not Europe. So the fact that Fosu-Mensah was able to man mark Sane and use his power and his pace to obviously get in behind Sane and let the ball run out for goal kicks, and bully Sane off the ball to clear the ball long and get the ball out of danger. The fact that he was able to keep Sane quiet by obviously using that physicality and pace to defend well against him was absolutely superb. And especially in the first half, where Sane was, probably because of Jesus went off injured, I think that actually it was probably Sane being the biggest threat for City, but because of that, because Fosu-Mensah kept him so quiet, it sort of nullified the City attack, and that just proved how good we were defensively, in the fact that we nullified a team who haven't kept a clean sheet, or who, a team hasn't kept a clean sheet against them this season. The fact that we done it, and the fact that Leroy Sane was the biggest threat and Fosu-Mensah stopped him, which that just really summarises and epitomises how good our performance was. But in terms of his overall performance, yes, he done great at keeping Leroy Sane quiet, but obviously winning the ball off of him and crossing the ball. But overall, his overall game plan, offensive and defensively, he was very strong when he was tackling, so obviously getting the ball off Sane and De Bruyne and the likes of that, but also composed on the ball. So rather than just giving possession back to Man City and clearing the ball long every time we were in our own half, he'd try and play the ball with some crossfield passes or pass it out from the back, so that way we didn't lose possession, and that way we limited City to as little chances as possible. Yes, they had about 70% possession, but because we weren't just giving the ball away, it gave us a little bit more chance to have a little bit more control on the game. And you've got to say Fosu-Mensah was one of the main players for that, purely because of how composed he was on the ball and the fact that he didn't give it away. But to be honest, it is a great performance overall. He's only on loan, so we've got to treasure his performances whilst he's still at the club, because really the fact that Valencia at Man United is getting a bit old now, Fosu-Mensah, if he carries on performances like this, he'll go back to Man United and he'll be starting for them. So there's no way probably that we're going to get him back next season, but we need to cherish it while we still have got him, because at the moment his performances are absolutely fantastic. But like what I've said already, obviously he's a lone player, but the fact that he puts in such a good performance just shows how professional he is with his performances. Superb display from him. And when you consider, like I've said, it's his first start back from injury, so he's been in and out of the side, coming off the bench and not really starting. But this is his first game coming back from injury, and he put in a really good performance. And like I've said already, it was mainly the pace and power which made him have that edge on the opponents. Because if it wasn't for the pace and the power, Leroy Sané would have ran rings around him, would have taken the ball off him quite a lot of the times. But because he used his pace to obviously get in behind Sané and, you know, make these tackles and blocks, and the fact that he used his power and physicality to hold off Sané on quite a few occasions and actually let the ball run out for a goal kick, that was absolutely superb as well. And there was one chance in particular where we had a corner in the first half, got cleared by City. Within 9 seconds they were in our own box, but the fact that Fosu-Mensah ran the whole length of the pitch and still got the ball off Leroy Sané just epitomises how good his defensive performance was. So a 9 there for Fosu-Mensah, a great performance from him. Now to move on to the centre-back James Tomkins, who I'm going to give a 9. Made some well-timed tackles to dispossess Sergio Aguero in one-on-one situations. Looked well drilled at the back. So James Tomkins here, I've given him a 9, and much like the performance of Fosu-Mensah, he was one of the main key players in terms of helping us keep the clean sheet against City. So for that alone, I've given him a 9. But when you consider you've got the best attack in Europe at the minute in Man City, and obviously the best in the league, when you're up against them and the fact that you keep a clean sheet where no team has managed to do that this season, you've got to give obviously credit to the back line, but Tomkins in particular, because in my opinion I just thought he performed really well. But in terms of obviously his contribution to the game, yes, he looked well drilled at the back, and he obviously stuck to the game plan and made sure that whatever City done, we nullified it to make sure we could keep the clean sheet. We've done that really, really well. So in terms of, you know, being well drilled at the back and keeping to the game plan, I thought he done really well. But one thing in particular which I thought he done really well is that when Jesus went off, obviously went off injured, Aguero came off the bench, and we know how good he is. The fact that James Tomkins was the man, you know, it was his job to mark Aguero, and the fact that Tomkins made so many well-timed tackles, not scrappy tackles, but well-timed tackles in the right areas, which gave the ball back to us. The fact that he made so many tackles so many times in the game, and in one-on-one situations, which are very difficult because you could get turned one way or the other. But the fact that he was able to keep Aguero quiet, who's, you know, if you look at the stats, he's done pretty good this season in the games that he's played in. So really, the fact that Tomkins was able to man-mark Aguero, and the fact that he was able to stop him with all these well-timed tackles, is just a credit to how well Tomkins performed. And much like, you know, I said about the performance of Fosu-Mensah when he done really well against Leroy Sané, Tomkins, yes, he didn't have to deal with Sané, but he dealt with Aguero really well. So in terms of our game plan, you know, certain players marking certain opposition players, you know, it was Tomkins' job to deal with Aguero, and I thought he done really well in terms of doing that. But like I've said already, I've given him a 9, and I keep saying this week in, week out, but quite consistently over the last sort of 4-5 games, he's constantly been up there as one of the best players in the game, and you'll hear that later on in the man of the match, which really just epitomises how good and how reliable he is at the back. The fact that he can constantly put in these good performances just shows how good of a player he is. You know, the fact that he doesn't have an off game, he always puts in good performances. And, you know, if you look at the Arsenal game in particular, I thought he was excellent in that game, other than the 3 goals we conceded. So really, in the last few games, Tomkins has been one of the most important players. And, you know, when we went 8 games unbeaten, he was, towards the end of that, he was one of the main pivotal players in that as well. So really, you know, this game, obviously he played really well, but he's carrying on his really good form, you know, recently. And to be honest, he's quite fast becoming a fan favourite. And to be honest, it's purely because of how reliable he is at the heart of the defence. The fact that he doesn't often make a mistake, the fact that he makes a tackle, he makes these blocks, ditch blocks, the fact that he does what he can, and, you know, does the maximum he can do possible to stop any opposition. But in this instance, you've got the best attacking team at the moment, and the fact that Tomkins was able to stop him just proves how important he is at the heart of the defence. And like I've said already, his recent form has been fine, it's been fantastic, and he just carried that form on with a terrific display here. Because against Arsenal, we conceded 3 goals. It weren't the best performance, but he done alright, and I think I gave him a 7. But in this game here, he carried on the form, but went one better in what was a terrific defensive performance. And he's one of the players now that has to step up, because obviously Scott Dann's going to be out injured for probably the rest of the season with an ACL injury, which it looks like. So really, Tomkins is going to be the one to step up, not only defensively in terms of being that leader at the back, but also in terms of maybe taking captaincy. Because although Yohan Cabaye has been given the armband, and Speroni, when he's played, he's been given the armband, and even Joe Ward last season got given the armband. Yes, these players have been given the captaincy before, but for me personally, I think a centre-back is probably one of the better positions to have the captaincy, and I think James Tomkins is, the fact that how well he led when he was at, against West Ham, when he was at West Ham, the fact that he done really well there and he was a leader there, I think he could do the same here and be the captain for Palace. So really, yes, he's been terrific in recent weeks, but he's now got to take it one step further, because obviously we're missing key players, and now he's got to be the main man at the back to keep it all together and and continue this form onwards. And to be honest, there are a few nominations for the captaincy. I've already mentioned some there. We've got Puncheon, but he's probably out injured now. We've got Speroni, we've got Cabaye, Milivojevic, you could argue as well. Obviously Joe Ward as well. So you've got all of these nominations, but for me personally, I think the fact that Tomkins, has done reasonably well when he was at West Ham, being a leader, I think actually maybe he can, transfer that here and be a good leader here for Palace. But do comment below whether you think he should become the captain, because I've certainly seen a few people on Twitter do say it. But do also comment below how good you thought his performance was and how important he will be in the upcoming weeks. But to be honest, James Tomkins, much like Fosu-Mensah, two of the main players which helped us to win the game, and I think it's fair that I've given him a 9. Like I've said already, he looked well drilled at the back, making blocks, making challenges, and then well-timed tackles on Aguero in particular in them one-on-one situations were absolutely fantastic. So another good performance from Mr. Reliable, and a 9 for him. Now to move on to Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 5. Fouled Kevin De Bruyne, who was heading towards goal but injured himself in the process and was carried off in a stretcher in the 18th minute. So Scott Dann here, I've given him a 5, and that's not to say that he performed really bad in this game, but the fact that he obviously got injured within the first 20 minutes of the game, and I think it was around the 18th minute anyway, the fact that he got taken off injured, and the fact that he made that challenge, which obviously didn't punish us, but the fact that it put us in danger with the free kick, obviously it's a bit dangerous and he got booked for it. But to be honest, in them 18 minutes he was on the field, the fact that we had constant onslaught from City, the fact that we obviously kept it quite quiet at the back in that sort of time, you've got to give a little bit of credit to Scott Dann. But I've purely given him a 5, purely because he didn't have that much influence in the game, because obviously he was injured quite early on in the game. But like I've said, Kevin De Bruyne, probably in my opinion the best midfielder in the league this season, playing in a cam role. And to be honest, I thought he done alright in this game, but it was a bit frustrating for him because everything he did do, we just nullified. So Kevin De Bruyne tried to get things going for City, didn't quite work because we defended so well. And in this instance, De Bruyne is through on goal. He's going to try and have a shot or cross it to someone else in the box. And Scott Dann comes in from behind, takes one for the team, let's call it, makes that tackle. But because he made that tackle, he ended up injuring himself. And obviously, it looks like quite a serious injury because he got stretchered off. But to be honest, obviously because he got stretched off quite early on, and because it didn't look like it didn't look like a good injury, it looks very serious. It doesn't look like good news for him. It's rumoured to be ligament damage, but if that is true, if that's true in his knee, that's going to keep him out for the rest of the season. So yes, Sakho's had a few injuries with his knee, but if it is ligament damage, then we're probably going to see this is the last we've seen of Scott Dann this season. But to be honest, Hodgson did say in his presser that he's going to obviously have a scan on Monday, but obviously it doesn't look good, to be honest. Yes, he's going to have a scan and that will prove the extent of it, but the fact that how bad it looked on the field and the fact that people could hear him screaming in the stands from the field really just shows how bad of an injury it is. And to be honest, I wish Scott Dann all the best in his recovery. And although the media only seem to care about Jesus and De Bruyne and their injuries, they don't seem to care the fact that Scott Dann's got a season-ending injury. Even though they don't care about that, I do wish Scott Dann all the best in his recovery. But the main thing for me now is, because we've got him out injured, we've got, obviously, Mamadou Sakho's already out injured, and the fact that Damien Delaney hasn't really played this season, that's really leaving us quite stretched at the back. So really, in a transfer window now, other than a striker and a keeper, I think our main key player to bring in has to be a centre-back, because it really needs to be addressed now, because if Scott Dann is out for the rest of the season and we've got an injury-prone James Tomkins, it's really important that we do get another centre-back in January. But Scott Dann here, I've given him a 5, not because he had a bad performance, just purely because he got injured quite early on in the game. But like I've said, them few minutes he was on the field, he did do alright in them 80 minutes to keep City quiet, so I'll give him credit for that. But a 5 for him purely because he got injured quite early on. And hopefully, obviously it doesn't look good, but hopefully the injury isn't too bad, and I wish him all the best with his recovery. Now to move on to the left back, Patrick Van Aanholt, who I am going to give an 8. Did well to deny Gundogan with a well-timed tackle in his own box. At the other end he struck a volley which might have been headed for the goal, but for a good save by Ederson. His performance was a huge contrast to the start of the season when Palace lost 4-1 to Bristol. He played brilliantly. Is it a revival on the cards from him? So Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him an 8, and you know, much like when Hennessy was announced in the lineup, there were quite a few question marks as to Patrick Van Aanholt starting, and I personally did want him to start, purely because Jeffrey Schlupp hasn't been playing that well in recent games, and obviously because he played 2 days later, he would have been too fatigued, and maybe against the City side who had, you know, more days rest of us, it probably would have been suicidal. So Patrick Van Aanholt came into the side. Yes, he hasn't played well this season under De Boer or under Hodgson, but he came into the side, and that actually, you know, I've given him an 8. It just proves how good his performance was and how he proved us wrong, and that's all I like to see about players. I like to see players who prove the fans wrong by, yes, we criticise them for being bad, but when they come back into the side, they put in a good performance to actually prove to us that actually they're not as bad as we may think they are. And there was one tackle in particular, which just really epitomises how Patrick Van Aanholt was trying to prove to the fans, you know, that he is actually good enough to play at left back. It was one from Gundogan. Obviously Gundogan going through on goal, fantastic well-timed tackle in his own box from Patrick Van Aanholt to get the ball away, and obviously we cleared the danger. And I've seen quite a few people, and I've been in a few group chats, you know, talking to other Palace fans, and most of them said that in the ground, loads of people clapped and cheered the tackle from Van Aanholt as if it was a goal, which just proves how important it was for Patrick Van Aanholt to have a good game, to get back on the right side of Palace fans. And personally for me, he hasn't been playing great this season, but we gave him another chance, and he proved to Hodgson here that actually maybe he should be the starting left back, purely because he may not be as good defensively as Jeffrey Schlupp, but going forward he certainly you know, is good at that. And to be honest, obviously he's good going forward. There was a free kick we had in the first half. We whipped the ball in from Kabay. Pretty bad delivery, got headed away from City, and Patrick Van Aanholt about 30 yards from goal, just on the edge of the, yeah, he was about 20 yards out. He obviously hit it first time, and it was going into the bottom corner, but Ederson, who's been fantastic this season, he was able to make a save from City. So not only at one end was he making tackles to stop Gundogan going through on goal, but also, you know, from a set piece which went the wrong way, he hit the ball first time, the deflection, and only a good save from Ederson stopped him from scoring what would have been his third goal for Palace. So really, it just really talks about how good his performance was, and the reason I've given him an 8 is because not only was he good defensively, but he was also good going forward in terms of forcing Ederson to make a save. And to be honest, I talked about him not being that great this season. His performance was a huge contrast to the last time he started, which was actually when Palace lost 4-1 to Bristol City, which really just shows that how much that game obviously affected him, because he hadn't got anywhere near the side since that game, which proves that actually Hodgson, he thought that actually his performance was so bad in that game that he's not going to get anywhere near the starting 11. But he came back in here today, and it was like the complete opposite to that game against Bristol City, where he was absolutely dire. 2-3 of the goals were his fault, but he came into this game here, and there was one header back to Hennessy which he'd done, which was almost identical to the one against Bristol City, but unlike the one against Bristol City, rather than just heading it up in the air for a City player to get on the end of it, unlike what he did against Bristol City, he actually headed it back to Hennessy so it wouldn't go through on goal. So really, that just shows the contrast between the two games, where he'd make a header back to the goalkeeper, which conceded a goal for us against Bristol City, whereas he actually done it properly against City here, and actually, you know, it just proved that actually he may be improving. To be honest, he played brilliantly, and that's why I've given him an 8. But the question I want to give to you, to the listeners, is a revival on the cards? Because we know he hasn't played since that Bristol City game, and obviously Hodgson clearly prefers Jeffrey Schlupp. But because of how great this performance was against the top of the league, one of the best teams in Europe, could a revival be in the cards? Could this be the game and the performance which gives Jeffrey Schlupp, or who gets Van Aanholt in the squad ahead of Jeffrey Schlupp? I don't know, but to be honest, based on this performance here, and based on how Schlupp has been slightly disappointing in the last 2-3 games, I don't see any reason why Patrick Van Aanholt can't come back into the side. But to be honest, obviously his performance was great, hence why I've given him the 8. But yes, early on in the game, yeah, there were a few errors, but like I've said already, unlike against Bristol City, where he made an error and he let that affect his game, he made these few errors against City, but he improved immensely as the game went on. So much like someone like Fosu Mensah, who didn't start the game right, after he made them few mistakes, he carried on the game and improved as the game went on, which just shows that actually, yes, Jeffrey Schlupp is out injured and obviously he couldn't play for this game, but he shows that he can come into the side, and although he's got his critics, he can still put in a good performance, and to be honest, a very good performance it was. But do comment below what you think about his performance and whether you do think he will replace Jeffrey Schlupp in the coming weeks. But personally for me, just to summarise his performance, I've given him an 8, because not only was he fantastic defensively in terms of contributing to the clean sheet and making that tackle on Gundogan and actually using his pace to get in behind and make blocks and challenges, but also going forward as well, he had that shot which forced a good save from Ederson, and unlike what we've seen from Jeffrey Schlupp this season, when he does go forward, he actually provides us with some attacking intent as opposed to Jeffrey Schlupp, who passes the ball sideways or backwards. So really for me, Patrick Vernano, a great performance from him and a well deserved 8. Now to move on to the midfielder Zaha Riedewald, who I am going to give a 9. Started his first Premier League game since the opening day of the season, but looked like he had been ever present. He broke up dangerous looking counter-attacks, and his passing to more creative players was always spot on. His work in the midfield was crucial to disrupt City's flowing play. So Zaha Riedewald here, he hasn't really been given a chance this season, and here with our injuries in the side, he got given a chance and he took it with both hands. But to be honest, I personally never thought we'd see him again starting in the Palace shirt, and I thought he's probably going to be one of the first players to get loaned out in January, purely because Roy Hodgson doesn't seem to favour him, or purely because he just isn't being given a chance. But he got given a chance here, obviously because of our injuries and because obviously we haven't got enough players in the midfield and we needed someone who could pass the ball and obviously defend well. We had that in him, and he got given his chance, and he proved us why he should be not necessarily in the starting 11, but why he should be in and around it. Because this performance here, the reason I've given him a 9 is because he was absolutely solid. And in terms of players on the pitch, I've already given a few players 9s out of 10s, but along, other than Fosu Mensah and Tompkins, who I thought were slightly better than Riedewald, I think Riedewald is going to be up there with one of the best players on the day. And to be honest, it's quite surprising. Yes, we knew he had the ability and he's quite a baller based on this game, but we didn't know that he was actually going to play as well as he did. But it just proves, and I've seen a lot of people say this on Twitter, that if you do give a player a chance and they do take their chance, then it just proves you wrong. Rather than just writing players off after the first few games where they don't play necessarily well, if you actually give them a chance in the team, they will go out and perform. And luckily for us here, Riedewald got given a second chance by Roy Hodgson and played superb alongside Milivojevic. And that midfield partnership we saw against Huddersfield in the Cup, obviously Luka and Riedewald playing as defensive midfielders against Huddersfield in the Cup. We won that game, and I believe it was 1-0, so we kept the clean sheet, which actually showed that actually maybe this partnership could work. But since then, obviously, we went on our unbeaten run and we haven't seen that partnership since. But we saw it in this game here and it looked fantastic. And when you consider that he's only played a few under-23 games recently, hasn't really been given a chance in the first team other than a few sub-appearances, it's so great to see him come into the side and perform as well as he did. And like I've said already, it's his first Premier League start since the opening day of the season. Yes, he was terrible against Huddersfield and even Frank de Boer didn't play him after that. But the fact is, you've got to give players a chance to adapt to the league. Roy Hodgson done exactly that here against City, and he proved us why he should be in and around the team. But to be honest, it looked like he'd been ever present. So him alongside Luka looked like they'd been there all season. Didn't look like it was a new partnership, and clearly, they've got a little bit of chemistry there. They're both very good passers of the ball. They're both very good defensive players. So actually, maybe that partnership could work in the future. But the thing I really liked about his performance, obviously, other than the fact that him coming in and proving people right why he should be in the squad, is purely because of how dangerous he looked on counter-attacks. Now, that's not just because of how he passed the ball to players like Wilfried Zaha, but it's also how good in terms of winning the ball back off City, because he's playing defensive midfield. The fact that he can win the ball back and set up counter-attacks. And that's why, other teams like Newcastle sat back and just parked the bus against City, whereas we tried to play, well, basically we tried to go at City. We tried to attack City, and ultimately, in 0-0 draw, we both nullified each other out, and a fair result in the end. But the fact that Riedewald, even though he's playing in defensive midfield, he was quite crucial to our attacks, because he was the guy who would break up the ball or break up a City counter-attack and then pass the ball out wide. And there was one pass in particular to Wilfried Zaha where he got it with the outside of his foot, crossfield pass to Wilfried Zaha, pinpoint accuracy, but the pass itself was absolutely glamorous, which just shows how much of a baller this lad is. So really, not only was he good at obviously stopping counter-attacks, but also using them counter-attacks that he stopped to turn them into Palace's counter-attack. And that's what I like. We've seen that from Luka this season, where he'd break up the play and then put a ball long and start up a counter-attack. And that's exactly what Riedewald done here. Yes, he's obviously Milivojevic is probably a better defender, or he's a better defensive midfielder than Riedewald, but Riedewald is a much better passer of the ball, and that sort of combo worked really well together, because there were so many times where City were on the attack, either Luka or Riedewald would make that tackle to stop their dangerous counter-attacks, and then someone like Riedewald would pass the ball long. And like I've said, his passing to the more creative players was absolutely superb, and when you consider we had about 10 shots on goal, more than any other side against City this season, just proves how Riedewald set up these attacks and, you know, helped us to create chances. Yes, he wasn't directly involved, but he was the guy who set them up, and to be honest, it was absolutely superb performance. So not only defensively good in terms of stopping counter-attacks, but in terms of starting them as well, in terms of getting the ball to creative players, was great as well. But to be honest, much like Luka's performances have been this season, his work in the midfield was obviously crucial to stopping the opponent, and the main thing obviously is that City play lovely passing football, flowing games, but Riedewald and Milivojevic done a fantastic job in terms of disrupting that. So not necessarily stopping it and completely cutting out City, because they had their chances, but in terms of disrupting them and making City have to do different things which they're not comfortable in doing. And that sort of change in terms of how City had to play obviously affected them, and they weren't playing as well as they would normally do. But to be honest, you know, obviously this is his first start since the start of the season, and to be honest, he is a highly rated Dutch player, so we knew when he came to the club we've got a really good talented player here. He obviously hasn't been given his chance because he hasn't played well obviously in the Premier League, and Roy Hodgson doesn't rate him, but at the end of the day, if you doubt a player, you've got to give them a chance to prove themselves, and then you can sort of look at them and say, you know, whether they're good enough or not. But obviously he hasn't been given a chance up until this point, but this will be a performance he will be proud of, because he came into the side and proved to Roy Hodgson and to the fans why he should be near the squad. Because like I've said already, and I keep repeating this, but it's so important, the fact that I've given him a 9 is the fact that he got given a chance, he took it and put in a fantastic performance. But Joe Riedewald here, I've given him a 9. Fantastic at actually breaking up the play from City counter-attacks and disrupting their flowing play, but also in terms of his passing to more creative players like Wilfried Zaha and Andros was absolutely superb as well. So an 9 for him, a fully deserved result. Now to move on to Luka Milivojevic, who I am going to give an 8. Looked to be getting in the way of Dann and Puncheon in the early minutes, but sorted his positioning out. Made some important tackles and interceptions when City looked to get forward. Missed a penalty in the 90th minute. So Milivojevic here, I've given him an 8, and we know how good he is and we know how good he's been this season, and to be honest, he puts in consistent performances every week, and this was one of them here. And much like the performance of Tompkins, he carried on his good form in recent games to put in a solid performance here. But there is one thing that the negative of his game, other than the penalty miss, to pick up on his game, is that quite early on in the game, when we were trying to defend against City, and this was before Scott Dann went off injured, he was quite often in the early minutes of the game, he was getting in the way of Dann and Tompkins, and that's something which, of course, if that happened throughout the whole course of the game, it would cause problems, because obviously Luka wouldn't be able to do his job because he's constantly trying to get in a new position, and also the defence can't do their job because they're being blocked from Milivojevic. But he sorted that out quite early on, and to be honest, the main thing about his game early on which was bad was his positioning, but as the game went on, much like Fosu Mensah, he grew into the game, and actually he sorted his positioning out and his game got even better after that. But to be honest, other than obviously getting in the way of Dann and Tompkins, and the main reason I've given him an 8 is purely because of all of the important tackles and interceptions he made when City looked to go forward. So much like what I said with Riedewald, where he'd break up the City counter-attacks and stop them getting the ball forward. Milivojevic here done exactly the same thing, but here's where he was sort of more of the tackling side and the defending side, as opposed to Riedewald, who was the guy sort of setting up the counter-attacks himself. So Riedewald, yes, made a few tackles, but mainly he was getting the ball off Luka and, you know, spreading the ball out wide for counter-attacks. And Luka was the guy making these tackles and making these blocks and interceptions to stop City. And that's what's important, because you don't just want, like when we played City earlier on in the season when they beat us 5-0, you don't want to get in a position where you have to rely on your defenders to defend against City. You want a bit of protection, and that's what Luka done exactly in this game. Because if you've got a player like, say, Kevin De Bruyne or Sane or Sterling, all of the City's attacking players, basically, if you've got players like that running at your defenders, it's going to pose a few problems, because our defenders haven't got pace, and obviously they've got pace in their attacking line. So really, the fact that Milivojevic was able to make tackles and stop City going forward before they got to the back line, obviously that little bit of extra protection and a little bit of cover obviously helped us as the game went on. So really, to be honest, he was one of the most important players, and although he's not the most highly rated, I can certainly say that he just missed out on the man of the match shortlist purely because there were just 4 players in my honest opinion who had an even better performance from him. But to be honest, like always, he's always commanding in the midfield, so once he got his positioning right, he was making sure every player knew where they had to play. He was playing with passion, and he was doing all he could to make sure that we wouldn't lose the game. And when you consider it's a 0-0 draw, we kept another clean sheet. Yes, you've got to give credit to the defence, obviously, for their good defensive work, but also you've got to give credit to Milivojevic for giving that protection to the back four and making sure he can make these tackles and interceptions to stop the City attacks before they get too dangerous. But to be honest, he had a fantastic performance, and that's why I've given him an 8. But if he had scored the penalty, I probably would have given him a 9. And the reason I've given him an 8 as opposed to a 9 is purely because the fact that he missed a penalty that could have ended City's unbeaten run, he's going to be remembered for that. He's not going to be remembered for his fantastic defensive performance. He's going to be remembered for the fact that he missed a penalty. And to be honest, when you look at Milivojevic's penalty this season, and since he's come to the club, he's got a 100% record. But obviously now he hasn't because he's missed one. But he's scored 5 and missed 1. And all of his penalties recently have all had power in them. They've all had the accuracy. But this one here, right down the middle, which was quite poor. And also, there was not a lot of power. So all of his other penalties have had power. This one didn't, so that's quite poor. But really, we know the trademark Milivojevic penalty is obviously into a corner with power. Obviously, unluckily for us here, yes, it was a good save by Ederson, who's saved every penalty he's faced this season. Yes, it's a good save from him because it kept City in the game and kept their unbeaten run going. But in terms of power, he should have put more power into it. And like he normally does, instead of putting it down the middle, just aim for a corner because it makes it that little bit harder if you're not going to put power on it for the keeper to get it. So really, he had a fantastic defensive performance other than getting in the way of Dann and Puncheon quite early on. And as soon as he sorted out his positioning, he grew into the game. And like I said already, in terms of stopping City before their attacks got dangerous, I think you've got to give credit to him because of his tackles and interceptions he made in the game. But the main reason I've given him an 8 is once again for that defensive contribution. But if he had scored that penalty and we would have gone on to win the game, I certainly feel that a 9 would have been a fair result for him. But Milivojevic here, an 8 for him. Do comment below with your thoughts. Now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give an 8. Covered the entire pitch and worked tirelessly to press City's back line. His attacking intent was always there in possession, but it was a mixed day from his set pieces. Came off in the 75th minute for Jason Puncheon. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him an 8, and when you consider actually in terms of other than Wilfried Zaha this season, he's been one of our most influential and important players. He carried on this form here and put in another solid performance, and I've given him an 8, which I personally think is a fair reflection of his performance. But the main reason I've given him the 8 is because obviously we kept the clean sheet, but one of the things that was important in terms of keeping a clean sheet was limiting City's chances and stopping City from passing the ball freely around the pitch. And one of the main players who stopped City passing the ball around was Yohan Cabaye, because he, obviously playing in a more forward role because he had Riedewald and Milivojevic behind him, because of that he was able to work tirelessly to press the City back line. So rather than giving City 10 yards to pass the ball in, he'd obviously run up to them, put pressure on them, so they had less options to pass to. And that was one of the things that, although City had loads of possession, they couldn't do much with it, purely because someone like Yohan Cabaye, who was working tirelessly along the pitch, he was the guy putting pressure on the back line and limiting their chances. So it's not only about how good our defensive performance was, it's all about someone like Cabaye, who was not only going back and defending and going in his own half when he had to, but also he was the guy who was pushing City and putting pressure on City and stopping their passing, their choices in terms of passing. And if you look back at the replays and the highlights on Match of the Day, there's one thing that they highlighted which I totally agree with, is the fact that whenever City had the ball, there was 3 or 4 players around that player to put pressure on them, so they obviously couldn't pass the ball, but also so they had nowhere to pass it to. And because of that, and because Cabaye was quite crucial to that, whenever City were in attacking position, we were there straight away to win the ball back off them and set up an attack of their own. So that was quite important in terms of matching City. So rather than just giving them space and parking the bus, whenever they had the ball, put pressure on them so they couldn't do anything with them chances. And that sort of tactic in terms of what Roy Hodgson said, to put pressure on them and not give them space, it worked really well, in the game. And to be honest, whenever we had possession, obviously we only had about, I think it was 27%. I think that's a random number, but research it if you want to know the exact figures. But it was around 20 to 30% of the ball we had but whenever he had the ball, the attacking intent from Cabaye was always there. So whenever we got the ball, whenever we were in possession, he'd be the guy who would be on the edge of the area looking for a pass, or he'd be the one alongside Riedewald who would be looking to pass the ball out wide. So not only was he good at stopping City and doing his defensive works and limiting their chances, he was also good in terms of being that attacking threat. But to be honest, yes, that was all great, but the reason he didn't get a 9 for me is obviously he came off for Jason Puncheon, towards the end of the game, 75th minute, so that, you can't get a great rating if you come off quite early in the game, which is quite understandable. But the thing really that, if he had done this, it would have made his game even better and probably a 9. It's just a few of his set piece deliveries weren't exactly that good. So there was one quite early on which Patrick Vellano hit the rebound and it went just wide. But that actually, obviously the chance from Vellano was good, but the set piece from Cabaye was absolutely horrible. He put the ball in, it didn't even clear, the first line of defenders in the City box, or so the first line of our players in the box, and City were able to clear. So that was one example where he put the ball into the area and it was quite a poor delivery. Didn't go far enough or high enough to obviously for us to attack it, so that was bad. And then there were a few corners. We had quite a lot of corners in the game. There were a few corners but that were quite poor, didn't get to the right person. And also, like I've said already, a few set pieces and chances like that where actually his set piece deliveries were quite poor. But other than that, the fact that he worked tirelessly was fantastic, and like I've said already, his attacking intent was there to be seen. And like I've said already, he worked hard with and without the ball. So when in possession, he'd attack. When not in possession, he'd put pressure on the back line. And to be honest, whenever he had possession of the ball, he'd done really good work with it. And the thing is, obviously our captain went off injured, Scott Dann, so Cabaye got given the armband, and I was watching the game thinking, I didn't quite see who got the armband, so I'm trying to guess, was it Tompkins, was it Hennessy giving it, was it all of these other players, was it Luka? But then I saw Cabaye got it, which I think that's fair enough. Cabaye's one of the longest serving players at the club at the minute, so it's rightly deserved that he gets the captain's armband. And although obviously he went off injured and gave it to Jason Puncheon in the 75th minute, I still thought that it was great to see him be the captain. And with someone like Dan now going to be out for the rest of the season, and someone like Sakho still a few weeks away from returning, maybe someone like Cabaye or Luka could get the captain's armband, because I think they obviously been at the club long enough, and also they've got that leadership skills. And I personally thought that obviously he had a great game, but just to top it off and something for him to, an achievement for him, is the fact that he got given the captain's armband. And although he wore it for a short time, I think that's a great honour for him. Obviously, he's been here for quite a few years now, and it's great for him to have the captain's armband. But Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him an 8. A good performance from him, working tirelessly to press City's backline and obviously to help us when going forward and attacking. But to be honest, the only downside of his performance, and the only reason I've given him an 8 as opposed to a 9, is purely because of his mixed day in terms of his set piece deliveries. But Yohan Cabaye here, a good performance from him. Now to move on to the winger Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 9. Gave Kyle Walker a tired time in the opening minutes and tracked back all half. In the second half, his work rate reached new levels, as did the quality of some of his deliveries. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 9, and much like his performances have been all season, it was another fantastic performance from him. And actually, although his performances have been good recently, this is the first 9 I've given him in quite a few weeks. And certainly, quite a lot of players in the team did get 9 out of 10 ratings. But certainly, Wilfried Zaha, although I did give him a 9, he wasn't one of the better players. Obviously, hence why he doesn't get onto the man and match shortlist. But he still was up there as one of our best players, if not the best, but he was still up there with one of our most influential players in this game. But in terms of obviously his influence and what he gave to Palace in the first half, especially, is obviously Kyle Walker. He was playing on the same side as Wilfried Zaha, and although Kyle Walker done reasonably well to keep him quiet throughout the game, I still thought in the first half he had quite a torrid time in terms of dealing with Zaha, purely because they were both matched for pace and they both have similar skills, so it was quite a good matchup. And to be honest, other than sort of Kyle Walker having a torrid time in terms of defending Zaha, I still thought that Zaha was great in terms of attacking him, but also tracking back in the half. So the fact that we weren't necessarily parking the bus, but whenever City were putting men into the box and men into the area, all of the wingers and the midfielders, so like someone like Cabaye who was playing offensive, he'd come back and defend, and even Benteke was in our own half at times, which just showed it was a whole team effort. So not only was he, giving Kyle Walker a torrid time, but he was also going back and tracking back and obviously helping the team not only to defend, but obviously to go forward and attack. And then in the second half, much like loads of players' performances have been this season, first half's not very good, not that impressive. Second half was absolutely better, and you know, in terms of his work rate, in terms of what he did in the game and how much effort he put into the game, and obviously how much energy, it reached new levels. It wasn't like he improved like say 10%, it was almost like 100% he improved in that half, and his sort of, yeah, his work rate reached new levels, and because of that, the quality of some of his deliveries did improve as well. And obviously I've been saying for weeks that we need to play Zaha out wide. He played out wide in this game, and actually it just brought out the best in him. The fact that he could put in some of them fantastic deliveries into the box with some of his crosses was absolutely superb to see, and that's what we've been missing. We've been missing having someone playing in a cam role, obviously who was Kabay in this game, and obviously having Zaha, instead of playing up front, playing out wide. As soon as he's moved out there, he's improved, hence why he's been given a 9 rating. But like I've said already, came out second half, a lot more energy, his work rate improved, and because of that, the quality of his deliveries was superb. You know, some of the defenders, he was obviously Kyle Walker as well, he was, you know, running around him, getting deliveries into the box, and because of that, because of how Kyle Walker was eventually starting to deal with it, obviously that resulted in Hodgson moving Zaha to the other wing, which just proved even better because it meant that Kyle Walker didn't have to deal with him, and it gave us a little bit more freedom down that wing. And because of that, obviously Zaha went on to, you know, win a penalty. But like I've said, his first half performance, the word you could use to describe it was jaded, purely because he wasn't, you know, he wasn't getting into his usual pace and trickery. So although he normally uses it in the game, in the first half he struggled to get into it, and obviously wasn't given a chance to use his pace and trickery. But in the second half, he obviously got the freedom and was able to do his usual thing with his pace and trickery. And then obviously, like I've said already, that good battle with Kyle Walker throughout the whole game, because it was so good, obviously they had to switch sides, because obviously Zaha wasn't getting much freedom as Kyle Walker, you know, as the game went on, Kyle Walker was starting to defend better against him, and because of that, he obviously he proved inspired as he obviously went on to win the penalties. So not only did he get more freedom because he wasn't being defended against Kyle Walker, but also he got more freedom because he was able to run down the wing and obviously win the penalty. And although people say it's a dive, I personally don't think it's a dive, and the FA have said that they will take no action because it's not a dive, so there'll be no retrospective action. And despite what pundits seem to say, saying it's the worst dive this season, it's a terrible dive, there's no contact, it's not, in my opinion, it's not a penalty. It's really soft. So, to be honest, yes, we missed a penalty, but I don't really care because it wasn't really a penalty in my opinion anyway. But you can't really say it's a dive when Raheem Sterling won exactly the same penalty against Arsenal, which was even more of a dive because there was less contact than there was here. So you can't really say that that was a penalty and that Sterling just needs to learn to stay on his feet. But if it's Zaha who does it, it is a dive, even though Sterling's wrapped his hands around him, not all the way, but he's got his hands around him and he's pushing into him. And think about it, if someone's running full pelt into the box and someone comes alongside you and grabs you from one side, of course you're getting pulled back and you're going to fall to the ground. So it's not a dive because there's contact, there's clear contact there, there's loads of pictures, but also it isn't a penalty. And you know, people may say, oh, it's still contact in the box is a penalty, it doesn't matter how hard or soft it is, but in my opinion, you know, I'm not going to be biased here. It wasn't a penalty. Just put my hands up and say it wasn't a penalty. Yes, there was contact, but it was just a silly push from Sterling. But in some games, referees will give that, some they won't. But I can't understand why people would say it's a dive when clearly it isn't. And I'm so happy that Chairman Steve Parish came out in the Mirror, I believe it was, and wrote an article saying how there's an agenda against Wilfried Zaha, because there is, because he isn't a diver. But yet every newspaper, every TV show seems to say, oh, he's a diver, yet people like Jesus, like Sterling, you know, they get away with dives when actually they're even more of a dive than this one is, because this one, there was contact there, Raheem Sterling pushed him to the ground, and if you are going to say someone like Dele Alli who dives, he just needs to learn, then why doesn't Wilfried Zaha just have to learn? But is it because he doesn't play for a top 6 side? Maybe it is. Maybe because he doesn't play for a top 6 side, it's a dive, whereas if, you know, if Dele Alli had done exactly the same thing, if Raheem Sterling done the same thing, it wouldn't be a dive, purely because they're English and they need to learn. So whatever it is, whatever this media agenda is against Wilfried Zaha, it really needs to stop, because it's quite stupid, because they're just saying he's a diver when actually there's no justification for that. And actually, if you don't watch him week in, week out, why are you going to comment on it? Because us fans who watch him week in, week out know that he doesn't dive. And once again, now that just pulls it away from actually what was a good performance from him, because the media are not concentrating on the fact that he won the penalty with great skill, which they would say Dele Alli did, and they're not concentrating on how good his deliveries were. They're just concentrating on the fact that he's a supposed diver. So really, all this stuff in the media, this agenda, is actually taken away from what was a very good performance from Wilf. But the main reason I've given him 9, just to summarise, is the fact that even though he struggled in the first half because Kyle Walker, obviously he was giving him a torrid time, but Kyle Walker was doing well to deal with it, and obviously he was tracking back. But in the second half, he came out, obviously he was a bit jaded, came out even better. His work rate improved massively, and obviously his deliveries improved tenfold as well. So not only did he come out improved in the second half, but when he was moved out wide onto the other wing away from Kyle Walker, he obviously proved even more inspired, even more up for the game. And unluckily for us, he obviously won the penalty, but obviously we weren't able to convert it. But imagine that, if he had won the penalty and we would have scored it, you would have said that Wilfried Zaha would have been one of the man of the matches, purely because of how good he was in the game and that fact that he had that influence and he was inspired to go forth and win a penalty. But Wilfried Zaha here, a 9 for him. Do comment below with your thoughts. Now to move on to Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 7. Had a quiet start to the game and had a number of shots blocked before they could reach the goal. Had a chance to put the Eagles ahead in the second half, but blazed a shot over the bar at the back post. So Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 7, and although his performance wasn't as good as Wilfried Zaha on the other wing, I still thought he had a much better game here. And whether it's because he had a bit more confidence after the Arsenal game, or whether it's because we're playing against top of the league and everyone's up for the game, whatever it was, I thought there was quite an up in tempo in terms of Townsend's game. And like I've said, although he wasn't as good as Wilfried Zaha, I still thought he put in a good performance. And something that I do credit him for quite a lot this season is the fact that he works hard throughout and he chases down, you know, loads of balls and puts pressure on the opposition, and obviously he harasses them by not giving them space. Exactly what Yohan Cabaye did in terms of closing them down. I thought that Townsend done that really well. So although he didn't have a good game, or he didn't have a fantastic game offensively like Zaha, the fact that he was able to chase down, you know, opponents and harass them and work hard is the thing that I like about his game. Because if you're not going to have any influence offensively, then at least try and restrict the opponents, which is exactly what he did. And to be honest, much like a few players, you know, Fosu Mensah, Zaha, Townsend, he did have a quiet start to the game. Obviously he didn't have that many chances, and there were quite a few number of long shots that were blocked before they could even reach the goal. So obviously with City being quite aware that we've got the attacking threats of Benteke, Townsend and Zaha, they were sitting quite deep when we were attacking. They were getting the ball quickly away from us because they didn't want us to damage their unbeaten run. So really, as soon as Townsend, you know, went to have a shot, it was already blocked. So, but the fact that he had that attacking intent after scoring that goal against Arsenal, obviously he's got more confidence to shoot now, and whenever he does get the ball, he tries to have long shots. But obviously they were all blocked before they could reach the goal. Obviously because Man City defended well, but also because they were aware of the danger that Townsend and Zaha threat. But to be honest, that was in the first half. He had loads of number of shots that could have reached the goal, but they were blocked. But to be honest, he had a fantastic chance in the second half to put us ahead. You know, great ball in, I believe it was from Wilfried Zaha. Obviously, Riedewald was in the box, he dummied it. He looked like he was going to shoot, and he obviously let the ball flow to Townsend. Townsend, literally, half of the goal's empty. He's literally at the back post. Instead of just literally simply just rolling it into goal, he tries to put power into it and he blasts it into the stands. So really, that was a fantastic chance to put us ahead in the second half. Would have put the game 1-0, maybe would have put the game to bed, but he obviously blazed over. And to be honest, people were saying that the penalty miss was bad. At least the penalty was saved, whereas this chance where at least half of the goal was open because Ederson was on the other half, that could have been an easy chance for him to tap in 2 goals in 2 games. Great confidence booster for him. But unluckily for us, which has been our luck this season, he blasted it over. But to be honest, like I've said, obviously he missed that chance and he had a few long shots blocked. But other than that, yes, he wasn't fantastic offensively, but it's his hard work which fans appreciate. That's what I like about his game. The fact that he'd work hard, even if he's not having the best offensive game, at least he'd try and defend well for the team and also close down the opponents. But like I've said already, yes, that was great how hard he worked, but I just don't know how he missed that wonderful chance. Because how did he miss it? You know, even I could have scored that, I'm sure, because it was a great dummy from Riedewald. The ball's literally at your feet, the goal's half open, the goalkeeper's on the other side of the goal. All you have to do is roll it. You don't even have to put your foot through it. Just roll it, side foot it into the goal. And unluckily for us, he blasted it into the stands. But Andros Townsend here, a 7, I think, is a fair result in a game. Well, though his performance was very committed and he worked hard. He still had a few chances which he should have scored from, and also that one guilted chance towards the end of the game which he definitely should have scored from. But Andros Townsend here, I think a 7 is a fair result. Now to move on to the striker Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 7. His movement off the ball was a marked improvement on Thursday's static display against Arsenal. He almost found a way to goal after rounding Ederson, but Mangala blocked his effort. After the break his influence decreased, but he was still winning headers and holding up the ball for his teammates. So Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 7, and in complete contrast to his performance against Arsenal, this was a much improved performance, not only because of the fact that he was having more chances on goal, but also because of his movement off the ball, and in terms of getting involved in play was much better. And to be honest, I think that some of the criticism after Arsenal was unwarranted, purely because we didn't get the balls to him, we didn't give him support, and we didn't give the supply to him. But in this game here, obviously City playing really, really well. Obviously we had to try and match that and still get chances to Benteke, and I think that that's something which, of course his movement is important in getting involved, but you have to get the ball to him and you have to supply him, and we've done exactly that in this game here. But if you look at his performance overall, it was a much more improved game. Obviously after his static display against Arsenal, didn't do much against Arsenal, and I think I gave him a 4 in the player ratings, which really just shows how bad of a game he had there. But in this game here already, like I've already said, in this game, much better off the ball, obviously in terms of having movement off the ball, but also he was good at actually winning headers, obviously, so he could get the ball to someone like Kabay who was playing behind him and keep the ball rather than just losing possession. And also he's good at holding up the ball for teammates, so once again using his strength to hold up the ball and stop City winning possession. And that was quite crucial, because you saw what Newcastle did a few weeks ago against City. They just sat back and just kept giving the ball to City, whereas we were holding up the ball, and whenever we attacked, it was, you could say that Christian Benteke was one of the main players, because he was the one who was able to hold up the ball and retain the possession for us. But there was one chance in particular where he could have scored a goal. Obviously, a long ball by Hennessy, great ball from Hennessy over the top. Ederson tried to catch it, missed it. Mangala tried to clear it, missed it. So Benteke's got the ball, rounded both Ederson and Mangala, has a shot, and Mangala was able to get up and block it. So really, it just shows that in the Arsenal game, he didn't do that because his movement wasn't good enough. Whereas here, he saw the ball was a difficult one for Ederson and Mangala, so he pounced on it, and unluckily for us, that Mangala made a good save, because if you look back at the replays, if Mangala hadn't have made that block, it probably would have gone in, because there was an empty net. So really, great chance there, great ball by Hennessy, but obviously unluckily for us, even though Ederson and Mangala had a bit of a miscommunication and mucked up that chance, obviously Benteke's effort was deflected behind for a corner. But to be honest, obviously his first half performance was great because he was moving and he was getting involved in play. But to be honest, his second half, his influence on the game decreased. But that's purely because City, they were quite worried in the fact that we were threatening them and we were matching them. So City were quite worried at the fact that they might not win the game. So they put more pressure on us, and that just meant that Christian Benteke, his influence on the game decreased because we couldn't get the ball to him enough. But he was still winning headers and holding up the ball, which is just credit to him that although he doesn't have as much influence and he's not involved in the game as much as he would have liked, he's still able to, when he does get the chance, to head the ball or to hold it up for teammates. And there were a few chances where, especially with a head late on, where he should have headed it goalwards and he went wide. So we did have chances to score himself, but maybe it's just because he's a bit out of form in a minute. But we've seen the header he scored against Leicester, so we know he can head the ball. So what he needs to do now is that when we get chances to him with Wilf and Andros putting balls into the box, we need to make sure that now Benteke can actually get on the end of them, because obviously it was a better game for him. Obviously he was working on and off the ball, which is great, but because he was doing that, he was getting more chances. But what he needs to do now is that, yes, he can make these headers and these flicks, but he needs to make sure that when he gets a really great heading opportunity to score, he needs to make sure that he can do that, because there was one from a corner late on where he headed it completely wide, whereas an informed Christian Benteke would have headed that bottom corner and would have been fantastic. So Christian Benteke here, a much improved performance from him, hence why I've given him the 7. And it was a great performance in terms of working on and off the ball, winning headers, holding up the ball for teammates. That was all great, but all he needs to do now is just work a little bit more on his finishing and also on some of his heading chances, because we know how good he is at heading, but he just needs to make sure that some of his headers are more accurate. But Christian Benteke here, I think a 7 is a fair result. So now to move on to the subs, Martin Kelly, Jason Puncheon and Chung Yong Lee. So just to talk about the substitutions, I've given quite a few different ratings. Obviously, just to go through them, obviously Martin Kelly I've given a 9, Jason Puncheon I've given a 6, and Chung Lee I haven't really given him a rating, and that's purely because he came on for Puncheon, who went off injured on the stretcher. That was in the dying stages of the game, and because of that he didn't really have that much impact on the game, so not much to talk about Chung Lee. Obviously Jason Puncheon came on with about 15 minutes to go for Kabay. There was a few sort of high risk passes in his own half where, you know, he put us under unnecessary pressure, where instead of just giving a simple pass he tried to do spectacular, which really is a bit high risk against City, who can punish you, but it didn't. And obviously, luckily for us, obviously because some of his passes didn't always find a Palace player, we're just lucky that he didn't get punished. But to be honest, he was stretchered off quite late on in the game, obviously because he went in for a tackle on Kevin De Bruyne, which you could argue is a red card. Having looked at it and having listened to other people's opinion, he's got a yellow card for it. Yes, it's a bit reckless, but it's not studs up. So in that, and I don't think his foot, both feet were off the ground. Obviously, it's a bad tackle. I don't deny that, but I know other players have got away with it. So obviously, Puncheon, it's all right for him to get away with it, because if people like Dele Alli think they can get away with it, then you can't punish Puncheon but not punish Ali. But to be honest, that tackle was a bit dodgy, but it's called taking one for the team. So although he obviously he injured himself, injured his knee, much like Scott Dann in the first half. Yes, he injured himself, but he took one for the team and stopped De Bruyne going through on goal. And all these people debating about it on Twitter, yes, it's a bad tackle, but he got booked for it. That should be the end of it. Yes, it's a bad tackle, but because he's been booked, they can't give him any retrospective action for it, purely because he's already been booked for it. But to be honest, obviously he was only on the game for about the last 15 minutes, and obviously he went off injured, so he was on the pitch for barely even that. But his only contribution was to make that tactical booking, and obviously because he injured Kevin De Bruyne, who, although people make it seem like it's a serious injury, he may even play tonight against Watford. I think City are playing, so really that just shows that actually it wasn't that bad of a tackle, because he got up and he was able to walk. But to be honest, that was the only thing he did, and obviously he got stretchered off like he did. But do comment below what you think about the tackle and what you thought about Puncheon's performance, but I think a 6 is probably the best way to describe it. And in terms of Martin Kelly, I talked about Dan going off injured. Martin Kelly came on for the injured Scott Dann, and it was absolutely fantastic, and that's why I've given him a 9. Because obviously we didn't expect Dan to get an injury, but he got a very serious knee injury, so it was quite a surprise appearance because we didn't expect Kelly to come on. And to be honest, he was fantastic. You know, he was on hand quite a lot of times and quite often in the right position to clear crosses. So once again, obviously our defensive performance was great, but Kelly coming off the bench was fantastic in terms of getting in the right position to clear the crosses and make tackles. And there was one in particular from De Bruyne where De Bruyne had a goal-bound effort inside the box, and Martin Kelly was positioned exactly right to clear the danger. So not only was he coming off the bench and putting a good, solid defensive performance in terms of limiting City's chances, but when City did get a few chances, especially that one from De Bruyne, he was able to be well positioned to block it. And that's what you want from him. I've said about he's not that good at right back, but he's better at centre back. He played this game at centre back, and he just proved once again why he's such a good defender. Yes, he may not be first choice, but with the injuries he's got now, he's going to have to step up alongside Tompkins, because I think actually Kelly can be a good defender on his day. So hopefully giving him a run out in the team will improve him even further. And if he can carry on performances like this, where he's got good positioning, he's got good tackling and blocking ability, if he can carry on doing that, then I don't see any reason why he shouldn't remain as a centre-back while we wait for the likes of Sakho and Dan to come back from injury. But in terms of coming off the bench, obviously it's not ideal when you don't start the game and you have to get yourself into the game. But I thought he slotted in really well against Tompkins and proved once again, I've said this already, but he's proved once again why central defence is his better position. We've seen how bad he can be at right back. We've seen how bad he can be at left back, which I never want to see him do again. So now, obviously, he's found his best position, which is centre-back. So hopefully, in the next few games, he gets to play there and develop his game as a centre-back. But a solid performance from him, and I think he's fully worth of a 9 coming off the bench and really playing a big important part in terms of keeping a clean sheet. Jason Puncheon obviously came on and then went off again himself, injured. I think a 6 is a fair result, and no rating for Chung Lee. Wasn't really on the pitch long enough, and really, because he was on the pitch for so little time, he didn't really have any time to make an impact. But just to talk about, just a summary of the game, many predicted, including myself, a really hefty defeat for Palace. Obviously, in the build-up to this fixture, because we lost against Arsenal, we didn't look the best in the first half. Because of that, there were quite You know, quite a lot of people saying we're going to get beaten heavily, and we didn't, which is a really great surprise. And to be honest, there were quite a few fans which didn't actually expect us to put in this type of performance where we showed spirit and passion. Yes, there were a few people on the BBS and Homesdale Radio, Homesdale.net, you know, there were loads of people saying, actually, if we put in a good performance, we could hold City to a draw. No one expected a 0-0 draw, but we thought that, yes, most of us predicted we were going to get beaten heavily. But if we showed what we've shown in other games, maybe we could have had a chance. And luckily for us here, some fans, you know, thought that we were going to put in this performance. We did put in this performance, and luckily for us, we've come out with a draw here. And to be honest, it was far from easy. And actually, towards the end of the game, it was quite a battle against a team that were trying to continue their winning run. So I think they would have matched the record if they had beat us. Obviously, I think that would have been 19 games. But we stopped them, and it ended in South London, which really just shows that how good our performance with spirit and passion was. You know, we weren't expected to win this game. We were expecting a 3-4, maybe even 5-0 loss. But we come into this game with the correct sort of performance and the attitude, and we ended up getting a good result from it. And to be honest, it could have been even much better. If we had scored that late penalty and we hadn't missed it, and it hadn't been saved by Ederson, we would have ended their winning streak, which would have made history, because they would have gone on to make history if they had beaten us. And the fact that we stopped them just before they went on to beat us just shows that how important that penalty could have been. Because yes, it would have been an important 3 points for us, but also it would have been a great day for us and a great end to the year in terms of stopping City. But like I've said, great team performance. And although people are angry that we missed a penalty, Luka scored almost every penalty. He hardly does anything wrong, so we'll let him off on this occasion for missing the penalty. You know, good save in my opinion by Ederson. But coming into the game, I thought we were going to get beat, so I'm not going to be angry that we lost 2 points, because really 1 point against one of the most informed teams in Europe is quite impressive. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and why I thought had the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. So unlike the performance against Arsenal midweek, where actually it was quite a poor game up until the second half, where actually Roy Hodgson sent the players out to actually try and get something from the game, before that it was quite a dire game, whereas in contrast against better opponents, we actually had a much better performance. And you know, when you consider that Man City are unbeaten this season, they were on a winning streak of, I believe it was 18 games, when you consider they're, you know, top of the league, they're playing the best football in Europe arguably, it's going to be pretty difficult to put in a solid performance against them. But Palace, you know, out of all of the teams in the league, to challenge Man City and actually end up with a 0-0 draw against the best attacking team in the league, it was us. And to be honest, it was a fantastic performance. And to be honest, with such a good performance, there were so many good players, as you've heard in the player ratings. You know, if I could have, and if I wanted to, I could have put more than 4 nominations. But to be honest, there were 4 players in particular for me personally, and for quite a lot of other people who stood out for me. But to be honest, in such a good team performance, not only offensively in terms of actually threatening Man City, not just sitting back, and in terms of how solid we were defensively, the whole team performance was excellent, and I could put the whole team in there. But these 4 players for me in particular did stand out for me, and when you consider how good of a defensive performance it was, you'll see how that reflects in terms of my nominations. So the 4 players I nominated were Timothy Fosu-Mensah, Martin Kelly, James Tompkins and Jara Riedewald. So the reason I've put Fosu-Mensah here, just to, you know, go over each of the players' performances and, you know, why I've put them on the shortlist. But in terms of Timothy's performance, he was absolutely superb in this game, and he actually won the Premier League Man of the Match for the game, which just shows how good his performance was. You know, it could have gone to a City player, but because of how good our performance was, it went to him. But in terms of his performance, I thought he was strong when he was tackling, and that was really important in terms of stopping Leroy Sané. And also he was composed on the ball, so whenever he made a tackle, rather than just hoofing the ball long, he'd actually look for a pass and actually try and do something good with the ball. And to be honest, you know, if you had to use a word to describe his display, you would use the word superb, because it was absolutely superb, and that's why he makes it onto the shortlist. But to be honest, in terms of his performance overall, yes, he made tackles and was composed, but the main things about his performance which made him above other players in the team was purely his pace and his power. The fact that he's got the pace when defending to get back and stop Leroy Sané, and the fact that he's got that power and physicality to hold players off the ball and obviously clear the danger. And there were a few times where he held up the ball and he went out for a goal kick, which just shows how good his defending was. So that's why he's on the shortlist, is the fact that how good he was defensively, how solid he was, how many tackles and blocks he was making, but also the fact that he used his pace and his power and his physicality to get the better of the opposition. Now, Martin Kelly is another man on the shortlist. He wasn't actually meant to start the game. He came off the bench because of a serious injury to Scott Dann. Obviously, we wish Scott Dann all the best in terms of his recovery. But Martin Kelly stepped in, and I thought, last time he came off the bench, he didn't really get into the game quick enough. Whereas here, he was alert straight away, slotted in alongside Tompkins, and he was fantastic. And once again, proving that actually playing at centre-back, he is much stronger than playing at right back, and that's what made him shine in this game, to be honest. The fact that he was playing in his natural position, where he likes to play, where he's comfortable to play, and that let us see the best performance from him. And to be honest, I've talked about the onslaught from City. They're one of the best attacking teams in the league, but I thought that Martin Kelly, alongside Tompkins, he was always on hand and well positioned as well to, stop crosses, to make blocks. And there was one in particular in the second half where he was on the line and cleared the ball upfield. So it's little blocks like that and little headers away from crosses, little things like that which ultimately, kept City at bay. And, Martin Kelly coming off the bench, you'd expect there's a lot of pressure on him because we were playing quite well up until that point. A lot of pressure on him to perform. He done exactly that and put in a fantastic defensive performance. And when you consider he's played 6 games this season, 3 of those with clean sheets, which actually shows that he's got quite a good defensive contribution. Now, in terms of James Tompkins, much similar to Martin Kelly, and the reason he's on the shortlist is because of how well he defended in the game. And the thing that I liked about Tompkins was the amount of times he had loads of well-timed tackles. So in terms of Sergio Aguero, he came off the bench for City. He was one of their biggest attacking threats in terms of being the focal point of their attacks. So whenever he was going forward, Tompkins was the man straight away there to make these tackles. And they weren't just, scrappy tackles. They were perfect, well-timed tackles. So for the tackles alone, and obviously for his defensive contribution, he's on the list. And I said this last week, and I keep saying it again. The last 3 or 4 weeks, he's always been in a man of the match shortlist. And in this game, once again, a 0-0 draw, a clean sheet. He's just carried on his terrific defensive displays and his, his recent form. Now, Jara Reedwald is an interesting one. He obviously hasn't really played a lot this season, and especially under Roy Hodgson. But he got his chance in this game with all the injuries, and he took it with both hands. I thought, obviously with him playing in a central midfield role, I thought he looked really dangerous on counter-attacks, which is something that we used to hurt City. So rather than just, parking the bus in our own box and passing it around and just putting aimless long balls, instead of doing that, we took the game to City, and Reedwald was one of the main players in doing that, because what he done is on the counter-attack, he would spread the ball out to Wilfried Zaha or to Andros or to Benteke and start up attacks rather than just holding the ball and actually not doing anything in the game. And to be honest, there was one pass in particular with the outside of his foot, which he's on the shortlist for that alone, but to Wilfried Zaha in the first half, outside of the boot, crossfield pass to Reedwald, absolutely fantastic, which shows how much of a baller this guy is. And obviously he hasn't been given a chance yet under Roy Hodgson, but based on this performance here where he's playing in central midfield, he's not only good at playing the ball forward, but he's also good at getting back and defending. We need to consider him to play other games, whether it's coming off the bench or starting, because him alongside Luka, I thought in the game that they done really well. But in terms of these 4 players, I talked about our defensive performance being so great. The reason these 4 players in particular are in my shortlist is purely because of how well they defended in the game. And I've said this already, I'll say it again, Man City are one of the best attacking teams in the league at the moment, you could argue in Europe. So the fact that we kept them quiet, you've got to give credit to the defensive players, and these players in particular. I could put other players in the shortlist like Patrick Van Aanholt, Wayne Hennessy. Them guys had big contributions in the game. Even you could say Wilfried Zaha, because he won the penalty. Yes, we didn't score it, but there's all different players on the field which you could give credit for. But these players in particular shone out for me because of how well they contributed to our defensive performance. But overall, a good team performance, and hopefully we can build on this one, get a few players back from injury, and hopefully, I said this last week, I'll say it again, hopefully our results will continue to improve. And in terms of my man of the match, I've gone with most people's choice in Timothy Fosu-Mensah. So he did actually win the official Premier League man of the match. He won the BT man of the match as well. So actually, I think overall, most people do agree with what I say. But congratulations, Timothy. You've won my man of the match for the game against Man City. You've done pretty well against your rivals, as you're on loan from Manchester United. You've done quite well to keep Man City quite quiet. But to be honest, congratulations to you. I don't normally give trophies or certificates, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very solid performance from you. But to be honest, obviously I talked about it being an overall good team performance, but the only reason I gave it to Fosu-Mensah above the other players is purely down to how well he kept Sané quiet throughout the game, because we know how good Sané and Sterling have been recently, but the fact that Fosu-Mensah on his own, that sort of one-on-one battle with Sané, the fact that he won it and he kept him in his pocket for the whole game was fantastic. And how he done that is by using his pace to get him behind and match Sané, and actually using his power and physicality to bundle him off the ball. And there was quite a lot of times where he done that, and that battle with Sané was absolutely fantastic. And I thought that in terms of our defensive performance, because Sané was one of the biggest threats, the fact that Fosu-Mensah done so well to keep him quiet is really why he stood out for me, the fact that he done so well. And overall, obviously, yes, it's great they kept Sané quiet, but overall his defensive contribution was fantastic as well. Yes, the likes of Tompkins and Kelly and Riedewald, yes, they were good, but Fosu-Mensah in particular, in the fact that how much he done in the game and how important he was in terms of stopping the attacks down that side, is obviously why I've given the man of the match to him. But like I've said already, do comment below with what you think and whether you do agree with who I've given the man of the match to. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Timothy Fosu-Mensah and Jara Riedewald following the game.
What a great result, what a great performance, but Wilfried, it could have been so much better.
Yeah, I know. I think we're just unlucky. Obviously, good save from the goalkeeper, but we'll take that point. You just got to respect the point, and we played well today, and I'll take that score and just move on to the next game.
You had a hard physical game on the left with Kyle Walker, who played really well. Switch to the right, you get the penalty with your run.
Yeah, obviously, sometimes it doesn't work out sometimes, so you just got to swap and change and obviously see where it works out. And I think I got more draw on the right.
What a great collective performance, though, Wilfried, from the whole team. First off, Cabaye pressing, you pressed as a whole unit, didn't you?
Yeah, obviously we had a game plan, and it's just get in their faces and just stop them playing, because obviously they passed the ball and run off the ball, so we just needed to follow runners and just stuck to the game plan, and it worked for us.
Forget the penalty miss, okay? You're the first team to take points off Manchester City on their travels this season, so how does that make you feel?
It's massive for our confidence, because I know how talented the team are. So it's a thing where if we're just all on our job, just stay focused and do what we need to do, it shows on the pitch.
Is this what Crystal Palace are? Really hard-working, really tenacious, but with talent on the break to win games?
Yeah, that's exactly Palace. We work hard to earn the points we get, really. So run around, and obviously there's talent in and around the team. So if we can get the 3 points, we do.
How optimistic are you, New Year starting, that this sort of display will see you safe?
Yeah, hopefully. Well, obviously we just need to keep on playing the same way we played today against Man City, and things will work out for us.
And you're going to be here all the way through? Palace fans are asking?
Yep, I am.
Tim, you got your Man of the Match award there. It was a great game for you and the team as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was a good game. We fought really hard. We worked hard. So it was a good performance.
Yeah, what Man City like to play against?
Yeah, obviously, they have good qualities. You know, they have good players. We are aware of that, and I think we did well today. So I'm happy with how the team performed today.
And your performance as well. Would you say it's your best performance in a Crystal Palace shirt?
It's not for me to say this. I'm happy with the way I played today. I have a lot to learn. I learn every day on the training pitch with the manager, with Ray, with Reedy, and I'm just developing. And it's up to the fans to say if this was my best performance.
And it was a clean sheet today. What have Roy and Ray and Stephen Reid done to get the defence in a good shape?
I think the shapes we do on the training pitch, you know, it's they train us how to be tight, to press, you know, to stop the crosses, and I think we are doing well. There's always room for improvement, but you can see that we are doing well.
And although we had the penalty at the end there that unfortunately was missed, but it's still a good result, isn't it?
Yes, obviously, if we score, we have 2 points more, but Luka was great today, and I think the whole team was great, so I'm happy with the performance, and it was a good result.
And finally, another game in 2 days' time. What are you going to do in between now and the next game to recover?
It's just rest as long as you can. and eat properly, because the game is around the corner.
Gyro ended Man City's winning streak. It was a great team performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was a great team performance, and yeah, unlucky with the penalty at the end, but still, yeah, I like the performance of the team.
How difficult is it to play against Manchester City?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. Everybody knows that they got a great team, they got a great coach or manager, and yeah, they keep the ball moving every time, and yeah, little give and goes. So yeah, it's difficult for us to defend that. They crosses the ball a lot, so yeah, you have to be sharp, and if you're switched off at a moment, they can cross the ball or a little cut back and they shoot the ball in, so you have to be focused all the time.
And what was the secret behind our performance today?
I think we gave everything as a team. Everybody run a lot, and challenges, 50-50 challenges, we won them. I think we won a lot of challenges in the midfield, and also the strikers won a lot of challenges, so I think that's important to stop Man City.
You played in defence at the start of the season, now playing in central midfield. Is that a position you enjoy?
Yeah, I enjoy midfield because I can defend and I can attack more as a defender, as a midfielder. So yeah, I like to join the attack and join the defense as well. So I think midfield suits me well.
And how do you feel fitness-wise after that?
Yeah, of course it's hard because I don't play a lot, but yeah, with the energy of the people in the stands and the crowd, yeah, they give me a lot of energy, and also my teammates, Timothy, he gave me a lot of energy, Patrick. So yeah, that kept me going.
Thanks, Sharon. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
What a commitment, what a result, but Roy, seconds away from even better.
Yeah, that's the disappointing part, I suppose, because we need points. It's nice when you play well, and I'm sure before the game, no one would have expected us to even get a point from the game. So one shouldn't start being too critical, because a point against a team of this quality is always good for us in our position. But on a couple of occasions now, with very, very late penalties awarded, we've not failed to capitalise. And you know, you look at those 4 points, you think if only we could have got those, we'd be a lot further away from the relegation zone. But the lads are doing a wonderful job. I'm full of praise for their performance today, and I'm very proud of their performance today.
You had a game plan to stop Manchester City winning away from home for the first time this season, and that game plan worked, didn't it? So how does that make you feel, manager, with your experience? Every one of your 11 did the job you asked for them.
Well, that's why I'm proud, really. I mean, we do work at our game. I'm sure all teams work at their game, but we certainly work at our game, and we've been trying hard to better our performances, to be more secure defensively, to work better with each other defensively, and of course to use the weapons we have at our disposal offensively to cause teams problems. And you know, we knew that the best way for us to get a result today would be to continue to try and play exactly the way we've been playing, but it will be a bigger test for us because any defensive mistakes are likely to be punished, and creating chances are going to be that bit harder against the quality of their defenders. So we didn't have to make any particular plans for Manchester City other than to use the personnel we had available, and that was probably one of the major disappointments just before the game, to lose 6 players or have 6 regular players out and then to lose a 7th very early in the game. That really stretches us, but it was great credit to the 3 young players. Van Aanholt playing one of his, hasn't played for a long time. Tim Fosu-Mensah's had 1 or 2 games. Gyro, I don't think he's played under me. This is his first game. Really pleased for those, and pleased also, of course, that the other lads who've been doing a good job for us could step up to the plate once again after a tough game against Arsenal on Thursday night.
Another one comes up for you on Tuesday, doesn't it? And Puncheon goes off late on as well for injury. You're down to bare bones at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, we are, but luckily I think 1 or 2 of the players I couldn't use today because their injuries hadn't sort of recovered, or they hadn't recovered from injuries from the Arsenal game. They might recover, so I don't think in terms of numbers we'll be vastly different from today, which is, I suppose, something positive. But I must say it's a bit unfortunate, in my opinion, that a team has to play one day. You know, you play Arsenal on a Thursday, you play Man City on the Sunday, and then they send you with 1 day's rest down to Southampton. I don't think the calendars have been very kind to us.
transfer window opens. So will you be strengthening in the next few days?
I don't know. I mean, the fact is we've been talking a long time about that. The club is very much behind any attempts we might make, if you like, to strengthen. But it's not easy. You know, to strengthen means you've got to identify the right players who are better and are going to get into the team ahead of these guys today. So, but we are, I think, short of depth, and everyone agrees that. So we'll be looking, that's for sure, and hoping that something will come our way that we can A, afford, and B, think is the right person to bring into the club. Otherwise, we will have to keep fighting and working hard with what we have.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Timothy Fosu-Mensah and Jara Reedwald had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Man City. But make sure to come back next week for our post-match review of the game against Southampton. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace!